Hi everyone, this is Casey. I wanted to share a quick reminder that enrollment is now open for the next cohort of my signature Paradigm Shift program. This is the program where I personally coach you through taking action with the essential skills and mindsets you need to support your PDA child or teen and make true progress. After every cohort, I ask parents for feedback, and what they say over and over again is that the program is life-changing. It empowered them to transform their relationship with their child and stabilize their home. You can use the link in the show notes to learn more, join the program interest list, or dive right in and enroll for immediate access. Now, on to today's show. Hi, and welcome to the At Peace Parents podcast. I'm Casey, and I'm here to empower you in your decision-making as a parent of a demand-avoidant child. My goal is to share insights that will generate aha moments and support your connection with your child. I'm a mom of two amazing little boys, one of whom is PDA, and I've worked with hundreds of parents just like you to teach them how to lead their child out of burnout and find the clarity, peace, and sense of community they need. Is your pathologically demand-avoidant child or teen's restricted eating freaking you out as a parent? Are you confused about why your child fixates on like 3 different foods, you buy things in bulk, and then they drop them all together and you have to start over? This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart as a mom of a PDA child who had severely restricted eating. And I was completely freaked out and terrified and felt like a terrible mother. So I want to talk to you today in the way that I would have talked to myself 5 years ago. Okay, so I'm going to start with a story. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you 20 things that I wish someone had told me 5 years ago about my son's eating and what to do about it. So there's 10 things that are going to be sort of like mindset and understanding the logic of what's going on and the confusion, and then 10 things that you can do practically to support your child. So I want to flash back 5 years ago to me as a mom walking down the aisles of a grocery store, just bawling by myself, okay? I was in the protein aisle and I was looking at all the different flavors of protein bars. So it was like I was just taking anything sweet and appealing off of the shelves. Like there's, like funfetti cupcake, I'll try that. Okay, there's brownie flavored, I'll try that. And I'm just crying and crying because I had this whole basket full of these sweet and chocolatey protein bars, knowing that my son won't eat them. This is immediately after I had accidentally ruined the very last thing with protein in it that he was actually eating, which was chocolate milk. Okay. So at the time he was eating only a couple processed crunchy foods. And I know some of you will relate to this. And I was watching him only eat Lay's potato chips, Pirate's Booty, popcorn out of one bowl when we moved. He would eat Honey Nut Cheerios dry, and it had to be out of a particular bowl, okay? And he would occasionally drink chocolate milk. But I was so worried about protein intake. I was so worried about nutrients. He would refuse to take any vitamins or anything that I bought collagen powder that was extraordinarily fine. They said it had no taste. And I put it into the chocolate milk and he sensed it. He tasted it. He knew I was trying to force something that he did not consent to into his body. And he dropped chocolate milk, which meant all of a sudden he was not eating anything with protein in it or nutritional value. So there I am in the grocery store just feeling horrible about myself, and all of the traditional approaches of exposure-based, the SOS feeding protocol where you start with being in the same room as a food and then progressing all the way up until you can put it in your mouth was in one sense working because he would actually do it in a playful way, but then he would drop other foods when he would add in like a wavy potato chip. The behavioral approaches I had used and the more traditional parenting approaches I had used had been what had led us to this moment where he just kept dropping foods. So I'm weeping, I'm terrified, I feel like a terrible mom, and I truly, truly do not know what to do. And I'm entering into this moment where I would be existing for about 2 years where he ate almost nothing except Lay's potato chips, Pirate's Booty, and popcorn. I still to this day am not sure how he continued to grow and survive, but he did, okay? And now what I want to do for you, if this is resonating for you, whether you have a 3-year-old or you have a teenager, maybe who's been diagnosed with ARFID or anorexia, and the approaches that you've tried have made things worse, I want this to be speaking directly to you because I'm going to be speaking to myself 5 years ago and telling you exactly what I needed to hear to save you the pain, confusion, and fear that I know that you're going through. Okay? So I'm with you. I know what I'm going to tell you is going to be hard to wrap your mind around and maybe a little bit triggering, but it will save you the years of pain. And that's my goal. So the first thing I want to say to you and myself 5 years ago was, I know that this is extraordinarily terrifying because you want your child to eat and grow. And of course, if your child is losing weight or you need to explore medical options, feeding tube hospitalization, that's a different story. But we were kind of hovering on the edge of this. And so what I want to say is your son will be okay, and he will eventually eat a lot more. But the traditional approach to exposure based in sensory challenges and bridges and any behavioral approaches will make things take longer and potentially undermine the progress that you're trying to make with your son. So this is first thing I would say to help myself trust that we would get through this and that he would eventually eat, but that we were going to have to take a very different approach based on the logic of his PDA brain and nervous system. And this will freak out your therapist. This will freak out potentially the pediatrician, your in-laws, etc. But you have to decide if you want to experiment with this, okay? The second thing I want to tell you is it's very helpful if you can pan out, okay? So like think of yourself floating above the situation and understand that even though you're viewing your child's struggles with eating potentially through like a sensory lens or a behavioral lens, what's actually beneath the struggles is based on their nervous system and their perception of threat. Okay, so that doesn't mean they don't have sensory issues around food, and it doesn't mean that they have absolutely no awareness or control of what's going on around food, but what it does mean is that the deepest root cause is going to be intersecting and driven by the perception of threat around continually losing autonomy and equality. So anytime they perceive you're above them, the decider, or trying to make them do something, it's telling their brain you're in danger or you're under life threat. And that 80% of what's perceived and activated in our nervous system is from the sensory and body system up to the brain, okay? So it's going to intersect with sensory, but we want to go deeper than sensory, which is the nervous system. Okay, what does that mean? That means that before we can worry about exposing and trying out new flavors and textures and sort of exposing the sensory, we may need to have a period of time where we're prioritizing total autonomy, okay? Meaning when they eat, if they eat, where they eat, how they eat. And I'm going to talk about how to be practical with what that means, okay? This is a little different than lowering demands, and we'll talk about that. That also means that when they're activated, their sensory stuff is going to be worse. Okay, so my son's sensory activation used to be so bad with the cumulative nervous system activation from PDA that he would smell a banana from a different room and start gagging. Or he would step on one flake of oatmeal that was left over from my infant son next to the high chair, he would step on one flake that was mushy and almost vomit. So certainly sensory was at play, but I needed to go a level deeper. Okay, so look through the PDA lens and understand that if you're pushing sensory approaches to eating at the expense of the child being able to decide if and when they want to engage in that, it can undermine the progress. And this is why we see control coalescing around, exposing or bridging to a new food that we've encouraged them to bridge to, like a Lay's potato chip to a wavy potato chip to get those ridges used to different texture in their mouths, but then they drop the Lay's potato chip. So if you're a therapist listening to this and do feeding therapy, I want you to listen carefully because this is the pattern that you might see. And it doesn't mean that the sensory lens is not important. It just means we need to understand how it intersects first with autonomy, equality, and the nervous system. Additionally, there are two ways that this is going to be impacting eating. One is as the child is perceiving threat outside of feeding and outside of eating and continually having that build in their system from perceived losses of autonomy and equality, they're going to be reaching a threshold, okay, where their nervous system perceives a lot of threat and they're going to try and control the situation. So for my son, and for those of you listening, control may coalesce around eating because as parents and therapists and teachers and whoever, you can never actually force a child to eat. I mean, you can put in a feeding tube, but you can't make someone else eat, okay? And so control is coalescing or they're equalizing around eating, and the physiology of constantly having nervous system activation, whether it's fight, flight, or collapse, is going to be impacting digestion. Okay, digestion is going to slow. Physiologically, they're not going to feel hunger. They may have stomach aches. They may have caprices, diarrhea, UTIs, all the things. So physiologically, it's going to impact eating as well. Number 3, I would tell myself to think of eating like this. I would say, Casey, I know you're super hyper focused on eating and solving that problem, but what I want you to do is to think of eating as a symptom of the larger holistic picture of your life with your child. Okay, so take away your focus on this eating for a second, and I want you to think of your day with Cooper, your son, as 1,000 micro moments or interactions. And you don't have to be perfect in those 1,000 interactions, but I want you to establish a new baseline where every interaction you have an opportunity or a choice point to accommodate him or activate him. And every time you choose to accommodate him, it will bring down that nervous system, that cumulative nervous system activation so that he can eat. Okay? And this is the causality that I would have wanted myself to understand because I was looking at my interactions with my son outside of eating totally separate from his eating. Okay? So for example, this was during the pandemic and I was really hyper focused on him washing his hands. Every time I would make him wash his hands, it would be a perceived loss of autonomy and he would activate and I would get upset. I would be like, oh my God, it's the pandemic. You have to wash your hands, right? But my trying to change him getting upset was a perceived loss of autonomy. So what I would have done differently is still made him wash his hands, but worked on de-escalating and not getting mad that he was activated, right? Or, when he was needing that one-on-one attention, my choice point would be to say, okay, I'm going to put down my phone and I'm going to, even though it's annoying, sit with him and let him control my line of vision while he's playing on his iPad so that I'm signaling safety. Okay, so all those micro moments that have nothing to do with eating, the hand washing, the deciding to do the watching the iPad or lowering a demand and delivering him the remote even though he's next to it and I'm in another room, those are the micro moments where you're putting drops in the bucket of trust and nervous system safety. Okay, and that will eventually impact positively his eating. And it will take time because it has taken all these years for his nervous system activation to accumulate to the point where he is having this disabling nature around food. And so it will take you time to bring that nervous system activation down. So the key takeaway there is don't allow yourself to only focus on the eating. In fact, it could help you to lessen the focus on eating and actually focus on all these micro moments that may feel unimportant in the larger context because they don't have to do with eating. But this is why we want to take a holistic picture. Number 4, and this has to do with really deepening my understanding of PDA and what it was. So I would have said, Casey, the more you focus on, worry about, try to control the outcome of, or the timeline of eating, the more your son will resist, avoid, and perceive threat around eating. Okay, so this has an energetic piece to it where even when I started to lower demands and deliver him food and not expect him to be at the table, I still was hyper focusing on is he going to try something? Maybe I should leave something out. And I had all this agenda and expectation around it. I had not gotten to the non-attachment piece because I was so worried, right? So if you're listening now or you're here with me live, I'd love for you to take a moment and think about, even if you're applying some of the accommodations we learn together, are you still in your mind and energy fixating on is it going to work? And isn't this declarative language going to make sure he eats the thing? And there's no judgment here. This is just a reflection point for you because this may be the next right step in your journey. All right. Number 5, your son's stickiest basic need is eating. I would have said that. You will meet other parents of PDA children and teens who do not struggle with eating. That does not mean that they're not PDA or your son's not PDA because we have 5 basic needs that can be impacted: hygiene, safety, toileting, eating, sleeping. Additionally, some of the PDA families that will fall into the eating category will have a very different type of control coalescing around eating, which may be compulsive eating. Okay, so the mechanisms are the same, but the way it looks for your family is unique. It doesn't mean that your child is any more or less PDA. Number 6, I would have told myself this, and this is going to trigger some of you, but I needed to hear it. I needed someone to reassure me, and I'm going to, in the show notes / tile copy beneath this live, going to put 2 citations for you, 2 books that are helpful to back this up. I want you to stop obsessing about vitamins, nutrients, sugar content, processed food, and unfollow all of the accounts that are bento boxes of vegetables that are hedgehogs and all of these things that actually energetically are making it more pressured for your PDA. Or the more that we focus on this, the more they're going to fixate because that's the nature of how their brain wiring works, okay? Anytime they perceive that you have an agenda and are trying to make them avoid sugar or processed food, they're going to fixate on it, okay? So we also want to let go, and this, I wish someone had said this to me, of Casey, people are going to say to you that they have picky eating kids. And you're going to look at that child eating mushy friggin' pasta swirls with homemade spaghetti sauce with vegetables in it. And your jaw is going to drop and you're going to be what the hell is this family talking about? They have no idea what picky eating is. So I want you to understand this is apples and oranges. Your friends and your peers and even other families in the neurodiversity space are not dealing with the same thing that you are. And so I need you to be cognizant of that and let go of this obsession for a season to get your child through this avoidance and threat around food, okay? So stop obsessing about vitamins, nutrients, sugar content, and processed foods. It's going to be hard and it's not going to look pretty. Okay, so you need to get through this period to get to a place where they don't perceive threat and their nervous system activation comes down. and potentially they heal some trauma around food. It's going to take time, and part of this process will be moving through foods that you, as a person who eats healthy, don't want in your house. And frankly, that's just a hard truth. I would have said this to myself to help myself. 7, I would have said, Casey, even though you're a researcher and a social scientist, I need you to stop obsessing about the research, about relationship, family meals every night at a sit down, Leave It to Beaver scenario where you home cook your meals, and connection and relationship outcomes for the child. I want you to think about it critically because you're trained as a social scientist. So you need to understand that there is an omitted variable, which means families with children like ours, PDA children, avoidant children, ARFID children, whatever it is. The reason they're not having family meals is because their child has different brain wiring. And that, if we don't understand it, can affect relationship and connection and other outcomes, but is not, you need to sit down at a family meal and do a home cooked meal and have conversations with no screens, and therefore that's going to be the relationship. You will find other ways to connect. And if you're making your child sit at the table and putting pressure on this situation, and they're so activated and perceiving so much threat around the situation and your pressure, that they're having meltdowns, that they can't eat, the two things that you want, nutrition and connection, are not happening. Okay, so we need to find another way. This is tough love, but 5 years ago, I would have killed for this. You will be confused about him resisting food and restricting what he eats, because at the same time, he also wants to constantly eat crunchy foods. Okay, so this is a big one where it's okay, you'll only eat 3 different things, but you want to eat them constantly. So here's how I understood this, how I understand this now. The restricted eating has to do with what we talked about earlier of him being past his threshold of cumulative nervous system activation and control coalescing around food and the physiology of having trouble eating. Okay, so now we also have a child whose baseline is threat. A lot of children orally regulate to support their nervous system regulation when they're perceiving threat, okay? Think of babies. What's one of the fastest ways that they self-regulate or self-soothe? It's through sucking. It's through the mouth. And adults do this too with cigarettes or chewing gum or whatever. But breastfeeding, bottle feeding, using a pacifier, okay? So lots of PDA kids, when they're younger, will chew on, the edges of a desk. They will have jewelry. They'll use pacifiers. They'll suck their thumb, etc. So the crunchy eating is oral regulation, even though they're restricting their eating. So for those of you listening, I would love it if you would comment if you're resonating with that dichotomy or that paradox of my child won't eat anything, but they also won't stop constantly eating. Because that was me for a long time with my son. You will be confused about him resisting food, and you will see over time that he will suddenly go through a new food that he's added, truly added, and not drop something else, and he'll only want to eat that. Okay, so this happened with some of the very first things he would eat, a rice cake with peanut butter, and then he'd want to eat it all day. And so I would just bring it to him all day. And it would scare me because it's okay, there's no variety, but at the same time, he's moving from Lay's potato chips, popcorn, and Pirate's Booty into an actual protein and some rice in a rice cake, right? And this is a pattern he still goes through. And actually, the research shows it's normal for kids to even out and regulate what their intake is, not with each meal or each plate they use, but over the course of a couple days. So I see this with my younger son as well. Some days he'll eat 4 apples in a sitting, 4 apples with peanut butter, and then he won't want to eat apples for a while, or he'll only want to eat pasta and pasta sauce, and he'll eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? But over the days, it evens out, and the research shows that as well. So I'm going to cite the books that back this approach up. It's called Responsive Feeding. Okay, number 9, I would say Casey. It's great when he starts adding foods. I know he's only going to want that food. So you can buy in some bulk, but don't do the Costco thing where you're like, I'm going to buy 3 weeks or a month worth of whatever it is he's added, because he will inevitably drop it. So maybe buy like 2 or 3 days worth of the thing and get used to the idea that you may be making late night CBS runs or going to the grocery store every day. This is part of caregiving for a child with severely restricted eating. It's okay. It's a season. I know it's annoying and expensive. The 10th mindset thing for me before we get into the practical tips for your family, I would have said to myself, Casey, get over yourself with this McDonald's aversion and everything needs to be organic. Like, McDonald's was the first meat, and quote, the first meat and vegetable that he ate. And I know that sounds weird, right? Because it's like super processed food. I never went to McDonald's. But after his occupational therapy, he would go to McDonald's with me. And he would get chicken nuggets and eat like little bites around them, and then he would eat some fries, which, you know, contrary to popular belief, is actually partially a potato. So for a long time, McDonald's was that bridge. So this is the 10 mindset shifts if you think that your child might be pathologically demand avoidant, and this is the root cause. Okay, now here's 10 practical tips that I would have told myself 5 years ago and not taken as much trial and error and time to get to, and also not felt guilty about. Okay, number 1, allow your son and sons, if they want, to have their dessert with their meal or before their meal to bring down that activation so that they can eat. Okay, so this is very counterintuitive. But what I have seen over and over, and this has also worked for the families that I work with, is that allowing autonomy and not focusing on controlling when and how a child eats actually allows the threat response to come down and helps them access more food. Okay, so I often give ice cream to my kids before they're finished eating dinner, or even before dinner or at breakfast, right? And, you know, I'm going to get judgment on social media for that, but I'm telling you so that it helps you. Number 2, lower the demands around food. What do I mean by that? This is a little different than autonomy, which means allowing them to decide when, how, if, and where they eat. Lowering demands is doing something for your child. So what that means is that you might need to deliver food to your child under a blanket, in their room, on the couch, maybe hand them food while they're walking around the island in the kitchen. Let them do that, okay? If that's what's facilitating their eating, I know the fear is if I let them do this, then they'll never learn how to eat like a civilized human at a table, right? Like, of course I had those thoughts. But again, this is a season and you're getting to the other side of your stuck place. If you need to spoon feed your child preferred foods, no matter what their age is, do that. If you need to get them fluids, even if they're 16 and they want a baby bottle and you to feed it to them, do it. It doesn't matter. Just do what needs to be done to get them the food that they need. This is lowering demands and signaling nervous system safety. So what I'm saying here is, if you've been doing this consistently for 6 to 12 months and you don't see any improvement, it may be time to discern if there's a different thing going on. But I'm going to talk to you about one of these things, which is looking for progress and understanding if things are improving. Only you can determine that. Like, I can't tell you that as someone on the internet who doesn't know your family, right? This is why we work on tracking indicators in my programs. This is number 4. I know that lowering demands seems like he wants to be alone and he wants you to just deliver his food and let him do his thing. But Casey, I would suggest you sit next to your child, signaling nervous system safety, potentially on the ground below him, so that even if you're not doing anything or interacting around the food, your presence of a regulated nervous system will bring down the activation so that he can access eating. So it feels like you are not actually helping or doing anything, but what I want you to do is just focus on like sitting on the ground, reading a book next to your child. I do this with my younger son who has some of the same tendencies where, you know, he's eating his snack under a blanket, watching an iPad, and I sit next to him and I just read a book, right? And I'm signaling safety. I'm there so that he feels more safe around food. So this is something to experiment with. Number 5, let your child poke at your food, touch it, play with it, even if it's expensive or something you really like sushi. So this is like the switch we always want to be making of like, oh my God, it's so annoying that like they won't eat anything, but like I finally treat myself to a nice sushi and like he comes over with the chopsticks and just like pounds away at my bits of sushi. But if we can make the mindset shift of like, oh, he is leading himself to some exposure, like what we were trying to do in those occupational therapy settings. He's actually being in the room with it, touching it, smelling it, playing with the little ginger things, and maybe even licking the wasabi. And actually, this is him guiding himself to the same type of approach that he resisted when I tried to impose it or a therapist tried to impose it. So this is what I mean by patience and child-led and always allowing for that experimentation because you will start to see it. Okay, so these are the small moments of progress that I want you to look for to determine, is this the right approach for my family, right? Because there's many other approaches that if your child has a different root cause may be more appropriate, but only you can determine if this is relevant for your family. Number 6, stop obsessing about utensils or manners. If they want to pick up their messy pasta with their fingers and not use the fork that you bring them, it's okay. Put a towel down if they're not eating at the table and get them a paper towel that you have one dry and one wet and let them explore, right? I know sounds similar to the DIR floor time method. Yeah, so it's definitely like developmentally appropriate, individual difference-based, and relationship-focused, and there's play. So yes, DIR floor time is a very good combo for this. Actually, my son's occupational therapist is DIR floor time trained. So this has been a way that we have incorporated this also into the therapy space. Number 7, experiment with using buffets. And I know that this takes more executive functioning and planning for you, but when you keep asking your child, what do you want to eat? Or do you want this? Those direct questions lead to perceptions of losses of autonomy. And the threat response goes off, and then they're like, I don't know, or they're like, no, and it makes them less likely that they're going to eat. Okay, so one thing you can do is just create buffets, right? So all the different preferred foods that they might like and set it next to them without saying anything and with non-attachment, meaning it's an offering and they can reject it or not. It's just there if they want it. So for example, now the types of buffets I leave my son might be like pepperoni, hot Cheetos, sliced Cosmic Crisp apples, whole milk with hot chocolate mix, and Pringles, right? I just set it next to him. And the more he can have that open-ended autonomy, not just about what he chooses on the buffet, but also if he eats, is game-changing, okay? And I know what you're thinking, and I thought it too, which is, but you're wasting so much food. Yes, this is part of the process to therapeutically get your child to the point where it's not medically necessary for hospitalization or feeding tubes or constant therapies that are making things worse. It's a trade-off. And what we've done to mitigate this as our family has stabilized is we now have a food composter that is like a system that like heats up the food and makes it into compost and doesn't smell in our kitchen. And then we have a service to take it and it feeds chickens and we can see how much we diverted from the landfill. So eventually 5 years into my journey as we stabilized, I could address that. But we can't solve bigger picture existential problems when we are in crisis with our family and our kids aren't meeting their basic needs. Number 8, practice non-attachment while trusting that it will be okay. Okay, so this is leaving the offerings, which are things they can engage with or not. This is also called strewing. So you might notice that when you start to truly drop the energy around, I hope they eat this, you will start to notice that all of a sudden, when their brother or sister is getting a smoothie you made, or you're eating something nearby that you actually want to eat and don't want to share, they will come over and be like, can I have some? Okay, it'll take them time. Their nervous system activation has to come down, so it's going to take months and true energetic shifts of you not trying to have an agenda, but you will start to see this. And this is, again, a sign that things are improving. And to keep going. You are the ultimate strew. What does that mean? The visual, sensory, or auditory offering of something that exists and that they can engage with or not. Okay? You're just there eating, supporting siblings, cooking in the kitchen, etc. Finally, my last tip. This is number 20 and number 10 of the practical tips that I would have told myself 5 years ago. Casey, you're going to need to practice a ninja level of patience, and you're going to need to look for the smallest, most micro signs of progress. It's not going to look like he's going to wake up and all of a sudden he's eating steaks and burgers. That's going to take years. But you're going to wake up one day and he's going to show interest in trying a different kind of apple. Or he's going to show interest in poking your sushi. Or he's going to actually ask to try that smoothie that you're making his younger brother. That doesn't mean he's going to wake up and be like, I want smoothies with kale in them, because he still doesn't want that, okay? Our children are neurodivergent. They have sensory issues. Their eating may always look somewhat different. But the thing we can do to support that is to accept that that's the case and facilitate collaboratively learning and relationship-based approaches to supporting them to access food. Look for the smallest signs of progress and trust yourself, because you're going to have all sorts of people who are freaking out around you. The grandparents who are watching your kid eat in front of an iPad and they're only eating hot Cheetos, or, the therapist who's like, you need to make them eat, and you're like, I can't. Okay? So you have to stay strong and determine if this is going to work for your family. And if you're communicating with a partner who is resistant, a frame that has helped the families that I've worked with is the following. What if we just experimented consistently for 1 month? Okay? And then we're going to collect micro data. We're going to notice shifts. If we see after over a month there's no improvement or progress, we pivot, right? But sometimes this is the only way to determine if a different way is going to work. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. It was wonderful to be here, and I will see you soon. All right, bye. Thanks everyone for being here with me at the At Peace Parents podcast. This is your source for all things related to understanding, supporting, accommodating, and advocating for your PDA child. To go deeper on any of these topics, check out my course offerings and masterclasses at the website www.atpeaceparents.com. To completely transform the way you think about and relate to your child and to bring peace and stability to your home, join us for the next cohort of the Paradigm Shift program.